Hi, and welcome to the Introduction to HTML course, where we're going to show you how you can use HTML to create web pages. My name is Lawrence, and I'm going to be your instructor for this course. I come to you with many years of web development experience, and I'm ready to help you learn more about HTML and, in general, creating web pages. We're going to start by giving a quick overview of how websites work, and then how you can check out the source code of all of your favorite websites. And then we're going to dive right into HTML, what it is, what an HTML tag is, what comprises an HTML tag, and how you too can start writing HTML code either with an online editor or downloading an editor, creating a boilerplate template, including the 4 necessary tags for HTML, so the HTML head, title, and body, and also an introduction of how tags get nested within other tags to create the HTML structure of your web pages. So commonly used tags such as headings and paragraphs to contain content, and we're also going to be looking at line breaks and horizontal rules. Then some of the common text formats to bring your text to life, and then content holders that are commonly used in order to structure the HTML code. Lists, of course, because that's a great way to list out content. Comments and meta information that is contained within your HTML. That's going to be super useful when you're looking back on your code years down the line and wondering what you were writing. Hyperlinks, and really this is the heart of what the internet is, linking between various websites and various web pages, stringing it all together in a giant web. Images, they're worth 1,000 words, and how to bring those images into your HTML pages. Some cool HTML character codes that can really liven up your web page, as well as HTML tables. So this is another common element in HTML. So tables are very often used and commonly used. And then last but not least, we'll walk you through how you can set up a GitHub page to share your content to the world. This is all done in a fast-paced HTML course where we're going to be providing all of the source code, and I am going to be encouraging you very often to try the code out for yourself so that you can get familiar with it and what it does and how it presents within the browser. And oh yes, by the way, if you do have any questions or comments, I'm always happy to hear from you. And I have included a handy PDF guide that we were just looking at. Work alongside the lessons. It includes a bunch of handy resources and links to help you along through the upcoming lessons. So let's jump right in and start writing some HTML code. This lesson, we're going to do a quick overview of the internet and how it relates to HTML and how you actually get web content and that's visible within your browser. So first you open up your computer, go to the browser, which connects to the internet through your internet service provider, and it looks up your internet service provider, then goes over to the internet, hitting the internet backbone, connecting with the server via IP address, and then from the server, the files get returned back again through the internet backbone, back to your internet service provider, and then finally back to your browser for you to be able to view and digest, showing the files that are being returned back from the server. So every computer connecting to the internet has what's known as an IP address. And if you want to check the IP address of any website, you can go over to dnschecker.org, type in the web address, and it will return back the IP address of the website or whatever website you've placed into the IP checker. And if you want, you can pause the video here, head on over and try it out for yourself. By definition, your computer that's connecting to the internet is known as the client, and then the server or the computer that you're connecting to is known as the server, and that's the one that houses all of the files that get returned back through the internet. You can also see all of the web code, the HTML that's behind web pages, by opening up the website in the browser and clicking View Source. You can do this on a Windows machine by Control-U, and on a Mac by doing Command-Option-U, and that will open up the source code of any website. And you'll find that HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are behind every website on the internet, and you can get a sneak peek at the source code by checking out the source code directly within your browser. If you want to pause the video, go over to your internet and check out the source code of your favorite websites. You can do that now, and I'll walk you through that coming up as well. And this is an example of a very simple website that we're going to go and click and see the source code. And this is what HTML is. So HTML is a way of presenting web content in a structured format that's more readable and that the browsers interpret, display for the user within the browser window. And that's what we see here. So it translates this code that's coming from the server sitting at this web address, and it shows you within your browser the structured code. Now that you've seen some HTML, how do we create HTML? And we need an editor in order to do that. There's online editors that you don't have to download, and you can simply go over to the website, such as CodePen, and go and create and write some HTML and see it rendered out within the display area. As well, you can go to download editors, and there's a number of different editors, and more than likely you already have application on your computer right now that can write HTML code. The editor that I'm going to be using in the upcoming lessons is available at brackets.io. So let's first take a look at CodePen. So CodePen.io is one way that you can write code without having to download anything. You do need to have an internet connection, and you can write your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code and then see it being output within the display area. I'll give you a quick example. So we're just writing a simple heading tag that's going to say hello as h1, and then you can see it being displayed down here in the bottom window. You also have some options to change the view where you can have the code on the left-hand side or the code on the right-hand side, and then the display area. There's a quick exercise that you can do. You can pause the video here and try this out as well. So go over to your favorite website or go over to the website that I was showing you, copy, paste the HTML code from the source code, and paste it into the HTML part of CodePen's editor, and see what happens, rendered out within the display area of CodePen.io. So this is an example of how we create HTML pages and how HTML code works using HTML code. In the upcoming lessons, we are going to be using an editor. So that means that this editor is going to be running locally on our computer, and it's going to allow us to do the same thing that we were doing here within CodePen, but it's going to allow us to do it locally on our machine. Now, there are a lot of editors out there, and the one that I'm using in the upcoming lessons is Brackets. It's a free open source editor. It's an Adobe product, and it's a pretty good editor. So if you are looking to use the same editor that I'm using, then you can go over to brackets.io and download the free editor and install it on your machine. And alternatively, if you don't want to download the editor, then you can simply follow along the lessons using CodePen and trying out the HTML code and seeing it displayed and rendered out within the display area. CodePen, you can sign up for a free account, and that's going to allow you to save the various projects and the various files that you're working on within the CodePen website, so you can always reference them later on. You can use either method, either the downloaded editor and writing HTML files directly on your local machine, or you can use CodePen or any other online editor. So whichever way you choose, just try to practice the code and become more familiar with the HTML code as you go through the lessons. So now I'll walk you through a quick setup of Brackets. So going over to brackets.io if you need to download it, and that opens up the Brackets editor. So this is my Brackets editor opened up to full screen, and I don't have any files created yet. So let's go ahead and create a new file. In order to create a new file, just hit File. Hit a folder first on your system that you want to save to, and then open it up to that folder. And then once you're in the folder, click New and create a new file. And simply save this file. So just do a save as, and save this file as index.html. And this will serve as the place where we can write the files locally, and you can practice your HTML skills as you go through the lesson. In order to view this file, I'm going to minimize this, and we'll copy the HTML code that we just saw from the source of that website. So I'm going to just grab the website, and you can go to any website and copy the source code, go back into your Brackets editor, paste it, hit save. And now in order to run the code, this is once again front-end code. So it's HTML, CSS, JavaScript. This is all front-end code. So what you need in order to run the code is simply a browser. And you probably already have a browser since you're watching this course installed on your system. So go over to the folder that you created and look for the index.html file that you just created. Select the file and open it with a browser. So I'm on a Mac. You can do the same thing with the Windows machine. Just locate the folder that you've got the file in and open it up in your favorite browser. And that's going to open up the file, and you're going to see that it gets rendered out and it's viewable directly within your browser. And you'll also notice that it's got a local address. So wherever your file is located, so mine happens to be within all of these folders and directories, that's what you're going to see within the browser URL. Brackets does have a feature to go as HTTP. So this is an option, and this is an option with brackets. You can go under File and hit Live Preview, and this is going to open up as an HTTP website. And this is just running on your local, and there's the local IP address of your own computer. So this is still running on your own computer, but it's running within the HTTP protocol as opposed to the file protocol, which is slightly different, but for the purposes of the upcoming lessons, you can use either one in order to run your HTML code because it's going to render out the same way. So go ahead, try this out, and either way that you're using, either method that you're planning to use in order to write HTML code, copy paste some HTML code and view it rendered out within the browser. And I'm going to be going through what all of these tags mean and how to write your own HTML code throughout the upcoming lesson. Hey, how did it go? Were you able to copy some HTML code, create your first HTML file, and view it in the browser? Or either way, if you went to CodePen, great job on creating some HTML code. So now we're going to get into the meaning of the tags. So the basics of an HTML tag, and for the most part, they have opening and closing tags. So here's some definition parts. So we've got the start of the tag, where we typically have a P for paragraph, the content is in the middle, and then we have a closing tag that indicates this is the end of the element. And there's quite a lot of different HTML pages, so we're going to take a look at those, as well as there's a guide for learning more about HTML available at the Mozilla Developer Network. So this is a very thorough guide, and it gives you a listing as well as examples of all of the different HTML tags. And we're going to start this lesson with some simple tags. So we've got the H1 that we just did see. So this is a heading tag. So what I want you to do is to pause the video, open up your editor, create an H1 tag with your name as the content between the tags, and then also add a paragraph. So paragraph is with a P and opening and closing, and then put a secret message within the paragraph tag and save it to your HTML. And we'll give you some more information on the meaning of these tags coming up, as well as I'll walk you through this exercise. So I hope you had an opportunity to try that out. Now let's take a quick look at some of the documentation for the HTML elements. And this website, the devdocs.io, has a listing of all of the HTML elements. So just as we saw, we just did the H1, and you can select whatever tag that you want to find out more information about, click it, and you'll see an example of the code in action, what it looks like in the output, and there's some more information and meaning that's behind each and every tag. So this is a great website if you want to simply explore and find out exactly what those HTML tags mean and how to write them and add them into your code. And this has got a full listing of all of the different tags. There's also the Mozilla Developer Network. So if you are looking to find out more definitions or want to see more examples of various tags and how they're used, there's an excellent guide located over at the Mozilla Developer Network. And so Mozilla, obviously, they're famous for creating Firefox, the browser, and you can go through some of this introduction to the HTMLs. They've got a nice HTML cheat sheet as well. So this has all of the listings of all the different HTML tags, version of HTML that they're compatible with. So right now we're on HTML5, and as you can see, this is HTML4. So there is a difference, and some of the tags come with HTML5, and they're compatible with HTML5. So HTML is always backwards compatible, so you can write the older tags as well, but this is when they came out with those tags. And we're going to be going through a whole bunch of tags as you go through the lessons. So not to worry, lots of opportunity to practice and find out more information on how these tags work. And now for the solution to that exercise. So we want to use the H1 tag. So just type it as H1, and then you can place the content that you want displayed as the H1 within the H tags. I'm going to keep my browser window opened on the right hand side so that we can see the changes that are being taken place. And I'll minimize my editor as well as hiding the files that we're working on. So when I refresh, we see we've got my name written nice and big there as an H1. I'll also add in a paragraph and then also adding in a message within the paragraph area. So let's refresh and we'll see that get rendered out. So as you can see with the HTML, we can already have some distinction between the text and the content. So it's not just all one blob of content. And this could be more information about the various tags and how HTML handles spacing and white space within the source files, and a whole bunch of useful information about HTML coming up. This lesson, we're going to be creating a website boilerplate. And a boilerplate is going to be where you can start and create every other web page from this structure. And there are 4 tags that every web page should have, and that's the HTML tag that's going to be opening and closing. And then nested within the HTML tag, we've got the head area. And this is where we've got all of that useful information that the browser can use in order to decipher more information about what the web page is about. So you've got meta information there, as well as the title tag will be there if you're linking out to some styling or on-page styling. You can do that there as well. The title is a third element or third tag that you should have within your page. Lastly, body. So the body as well, everything is nested within the HTML tags where we open and close it, as well as the doc type. And what the doc type does is you're going to find it on top of most of the HTML pages, and this is going to help indicate what type of HTML page the browser can expect. So it's communication to the browser. There's nothing that gets displayed out with the doc type. For doc type HTML5, it's just doc type HTML, and that will let the browser know that you're writing HTML5, and that's the type of code that it should expect. So I do have an exercise for you this lesson, and that's to create your boilerplate template. Going by what I've got here, I'm going to also walk you through creating this as well within that editor. So you can take a moment now and pause the video and try it out. Create your HTML, your 4 necessary tags for your HTML page, and I'll walk you through the solution coming up. Okay, let's create a new file, and this file is just going to be new, and we're going to save this as our template. So going into File, and we can do Save As, and I'll call it temp.html. So every HTML file, you need to provide the HTML extension. You might also see HTML, so that's another way to create HTML files. So either one will render out as an HTML5, but typically stay with the HTML extension for each one of the file names. So now we've created the default HTML page. Let's first specify the doc type. And doc type is not actually case sensitive, so you can see it in different formats as you look at different web pages, how they're writing that. So the doc type, once again, it's specifying how the browser should the rendering mode for the browser. And we're going to start with the HTML tag. So that's the main HTML tag, and this is where all of your HTML code should go. So this should be the top and the bottom tag for every single one of your HTML documents, and everything else is contained within there and nested within inside. When we write code, we tend to indent for each new nested tag, so it's a lot more easy to read. So now we've got the head tag within the HTML, and then also on the same level, we're going to have body, opening and closing of body. Within the head, we also add in the title. So the title is what's going to actually show up. So this is something that is actually visible to the user, and it's going to render the title in the top of the tab here. So instead of having the URL, which is the default, if no title is present, it will add that into the tab there. So I'm just going to put HTML course, brackets already updated it there within the top tab there. And that's it. You don't see anything else because all of these tags are just providing structure, and we haven't actually added any content within these tags. So now you have a ready to go template. So whenever you want to write some HTML code, you can also open up temp and then save as, give it a new name, and then create your new files from there. Hey, congratulations on making it this far. In this lesson, we're going to take a closer look at the heading tags, paragraphs, as well as line breaks. And these are commonly used within web pages. And headings are one of the most common used tags. You're going to see them all the time, and they provide that structure where the heading part gets more highlighted. It stands out because it's bolder and bigger text than the rest of the content on the page. Headings have 6 different levels, and starting with the H1 being the biggest, H2 is slightly smaller, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way down to 6, and 6 is the max. So 6 is the smallest heading type style that you can apply within your HTML. For paragraphs, we saw that the P represents paragraph, and content contained within the paragraph gets separated out from the additional paragraphs, so it provides some spacing between those chunks of content. Paragraphs can't have other paragraphs nested within them, as well as H1s. You don't want to nest H1s within an H1, so that's something to watch out for as you're writing your tags. We're also going to look at the line break, which is represented by BR, and BR produces a line break. And notice that this is a self-closing tag, so there's no content that's contained within it. For the browser, when it's rendering out the content, that BR means that this is a line break. There's also a horizontal rule, which creates a horizontal line across the page, and this is another way to break and separate out content. There is also an exercise in this lesson, and that's to explore more about the H1 tags. Use the H1 tags within your HTML file, create paragraphs, and then add some line breaks within those paragraphs, as well as try out the horizontal rule. Add in your name, use the horizontal rule, separate it out between the paragraphs, and see what happens. Try to get your web page to look like this, where you've got your name, the rule, and then the paragraph. As well, you can go over to the Mozilla Developer Network, check out more information about the heading tags, and see some more examples. There's also the dev docs, and there's also more information about the paragraph tag at the Mozilla Developer Network. So pause the video here, open up your editor, give it a try, and I'll walk you through the solution coming up. Hey, let's start by copying the template, go over to index. You can remove the content that we had there already as we're starting out fresh. And the objective of this lesson was to try out the heading tags. So I'm nesting a heading within body, and I'm just going to call this hello 1. As you can see, there is a difference. There's a larger size for the hello 1 than the rest of the text. So if I was just to write hello 1, that would just appear below, and there is some padding around the hello 1 as well. If I was to write, I'm going to write hello 2, hello 3, and what happens is the way that your editor, or the way that HTML handles white space, is that it only leaves one space there. So even though this is on the next line, or it could just as well be on multiple next lines, when we see the code being rendered in the browser, it's only going to treat it as one space. And in order to get the same structure, or if we want to move hello 2, hello 3 to separate lines, we can do line breaks that way. And as well, notice around the hello 1, there is some padding, there is some spacing around that. I'm going to make it bigger so it's easier to see, but we can see that there is quite a bit of spacing already by default around that. As well for the paragraphs, so I'm going to just type hello 4, and this is an example of a paragraph. And whereas when we use the line breaks, if we have one line after another line after another line, there's no spacing in between. But if we do paragraph after paragraph, there is spacing because the paragraph tag does have some default spacing. So there is a big difference between using the line breaks and the paragraphs on what you're going to see visually being output on the page. There's also an option to use a horizontal rule. So these are commonly used on web pages to make a break between the content. And as you can see, there's the horizontal rule being applied, and it breaks apart some of the content. So you can have distinct content on the page just with HTML. So in the exercise, we needed to write our name, so using H1. And then beneath that, to do a horizontal rule. And then beneath that is a paragraph. And within the paragraph, want to do a line break and then type welcome to my page and save. And there's the structure that we were looking for, where we've got within the paragraph, we've used the line break to separate out the two lines of content. And I just wanted to note that typically when you are creating websites, H1s are something that people use for SEO, for search engine optimization. So it's great to have within your web page. The search engines will note that there's special emphasis on the content contained within the H1, and you don't want to use more than one H1. So typically you'll have one phrase within the H1, and then you'll move down from there. So if you wanted to highlight a second section or second area, you'd use an H2 and then move all the way down to H6 as you represent different sections within your web page structure. And you'll see that the H2s are used more than once. It's just the H1s that you should use sparingly, as you don't want to have too many of them on your page for SEO purposes, as well as for readability by your users. Hey, in this lesson, we are going to be looking at various text formats. So they help update and make different text styling just by using HTML and just by updating the tags. Commonly used are the strong or the bold. So this is indicated with the B or with the strong. And there's also the italic or the emphasized. So I and EM. And then the content between the tags is what gets the styling applied. Let's take a quick look at the Mozilla Developer Network. Here's an example of strong being applied. Basically, it bolds the text that's within the paragraph and makes it stand out from the rest of the content. So when we look at bold with a B versus strong, oftentimes it's confusing because it looks the same. So strong is an element for content that is of a greater importance, where B is used to draw attention to the text without indicating that it's more important. So if you do have more important text, then use strong as opposed to B, because B is just going to be drawing attention to that text. And also important to note that older browsers actually underline strong. So some of the older browsers that might not be updated might also underline that strong. So for the most part, most commonly, you're going to be using strong over the B tag. There's also I and emphasized. So you see it's kind of italicized on an angle for the text that's included within the I tags. EM is used to stress emphasis, whereas I is used to display the text in italics. So once again, the difference that we saw between strong and bold, we see the same thing between I and EM, that they're both going to look the same, but EM is used to stress emphasis, whereas italics is just styling and styling the content in a different format. There's also mark to indicate relevance. There's cite to mark the name of a work. And there's a few other examples that we'll quickly look at in this lesson. So there is an exercise as well for this lesson, and that's to update some of the text content using some of these formats that we've covered. So definitely try out the strong and the bold, the italic and the emphasized, and then check out typewriter, source code, cite, address, del, inserted, subscript, subscript, small and big to get a feel for what all of these different tags can do to the text and how it's going to make it look different. So pause the video here, try some of these, and I'll walk you through it coming up. So let's wrap the word strong with the strong tags. And then we'll also compare it to what bold looks like. So versus and then bold. And most commonly now web developers are just using strong because bold doesn't carry the same emphasis on it. And when we look at it typically on a page, it's going to look the same. And this is going to be the same thing for the italic and the emphasis. So commonly we're using emphasis versus the italic text. And when you're just looking at it on the page, it does look the same. But as we saw, it does carry different context for those tags. Let's try a few other ones. So down here at the bottom, We can remove out all of this excess content from the previous lesson. And let's try the typewriter text. So we see it is slightly different. So I'll do normal to typewriter. We'll also do normal to, there's also one for the source code. So update TT to code. And with HTML, the styling will be applied to the content between the tags. And then altogether, that's the element itself. And I'll just add in some line breaks so we can distinguish between the two. And let's take another line and we'll try cite. And commonly used, of course, for citing. And it's also slightly italicized. So some of them do look very similar when you just look at it within the web page without seeing the source code. There's also address. And this one actually starts it on a new line. So some of them will have additional styling that's attached to it. Let's do another one where we've got the normal content. And this one's going to be for deleted text. So we do have a line through. And we still have some spacing from the address just above that. There's INS for inserted text. So that one comes with a line underneath. There's also underlined text, so it's just a U. Again, looks very similar to the inserted, but I do suggest that you do use the right syntax, the right for the text structure. There's also sub, and that moves the text slightly down. There's sup, moves the text slightly up off the normal level. There's also small, which is going to make the text smaller than normal. And then big, which is obviously going to do the opposite, where it's going to make the text bigger than average text. So do try it out, have some fun with it, and check out all of the different text formats that are available with HTML. How's it coming along so far? So this lesson, we're going to do a quick one on content holders. And there's a great example of a typical website where we've got the body tags. So everything is, once again, of course, contained within the HTML. And then we've got some more meaningful tag names here that help separate out the content and better understand when we're looking at the source code, what type of content is meant to be in what spot. Now, before HTML5, we had divs and spans, and they were designed to break apart the content, give us containers that might not be visible for the person viewing the content, but would help behind the scenes within the HTML to better structure that content. So we typically would have a div, we'd give them IDs to distinguish the different divs. But then when HTML5 came along, that allowed us to add in headers that were tags, footers that were tags, articles, A-sides, navigation, and all kinds of wonderful different tags that provided more meaning within their tag names. So we're going to take a look at some of these and build out a typical website structure. And it's not going to look like this because this is the website after the styling is applied. And the big secret is that all of these behave the same way. So all of these behave the same way as divs. The only one that's different are the spans because they're in line. So let's check that out in the exercise. And you can also pause the video here and build out your typical web page structure. We've got a header, footer, a div for all of the main content, a navigation bar, and we're going to be looking at list items later on, and then article and a side. So that's that side section that you typically see within websites. So that's optional, and I'll walk you through how to set that up coming up. So let's create a new HTML file, and we'll just call this as site.html. And I'm going to remove out the content that we had there. So we're starting out with a typical website template that we might expect. And within the website template, so most websites will have a header area. So we can add header content here. And it will also have footer area. So this is where all of your contact information would go, links might go. And then there's also the main content area. So this can be a div, and sometimes you're going to see them called sections. So that's up to you, how you want to structure it. So typically you would have a separating area that would contain your main core content, and then this would be divided into two separate sections where you would have one that could be a section or it could be article. So this one might be an article and has the main content of your website, and then beside it, it's got an A side menu content. And they're just showing up just as regular divs would. So they've got their own block content here. because we don't have any of the styling that's being applied to this typical website structure. But this was just to illustrate how we can use these new tags in order to better structure our website. And as you go through your web development journey, you're going to become more familiar with these tags. And as you're introduced to applying styling, this is going to make a whole lot of sense why we've structured our HTML page in this type of format. But for now, it's important to understand that this is a great way, and these tags are just typically used to provide structure before we apply styling and to divide up our content in a meaningful structure so the styling is easier to apply afterwards. Hey, in this lesson, we're going to be looking at lists, and lists allow us to group similar content together. And if we've got two different types of typical lists, so that's the unordered list or the ordered list, and the difference is that the unordered list will just have bullet points, just like we see under skills here, and the ordered list will have numbers 1, 2, 3, and we see that under the favorite animals. There's also another type of lists. There's the description lists. So you won't see these used very often, but you might encounter them. So that's just another way to do lists, and they provide another way to display list content. So in this lesson, we're going to be looking at the two ordered lists or unordered lists, and the only difference between them is the U or the O. So unordered lists have list items that are wrapped within the unordered list. So it's UL, ordered list is OL, and they also have list items. So inside, they're the same, but it's only the parent that's going to be different. So there is an exercise in this lesson, and that's to add the H2 title to the list and list out some of your skills in an unordered list and your favorite animals in an ordered list. So from 1 to 3, and then all of your skills. So you can pause the video and do that within your editor, and I'll walk you through the solution coming up. So I hope you had an opportunity to try out creating a list, and we're going to start with creating a skills list. So just call that skills with the H2, and then within the H2 create an unordered list. So that's indicated with the UL, and then each item that is listed within the list is LI for list item. And you can add as many list items as you want, and they're all listed within the parent. And I'm just going to make a few updates on these so that they are different. And then you can see it on the right hand side how these get listed. And if you were to change the unordered list to an ordered list, so the UL to an OL, you see that it starts to number it. There are some attributes that you can add to specify the starting number and so on, and the different types of bullets. So those are all available within attributes, and you can also do that within styling when you're applying CSS. So as for unordered or ordered list, again, we're looking at the list items. So we're listing out our 3 favorite animals, and in no particular order for me. So we've got cats, dogs, and let's do horses. And that's it for ordered and unordered list items. And you'll also find that list items are typically as well used in navigation of a lot of websites, because it's a nice way to output the content visually within the code, and then applying styling can turn it into a navigation menu. So that all has to do with styling, and and remember, HTML is all about the structure of the code before you're applying the styling. Comments and meta information. So the meta tag sits within the head section, and it gives more information about the web page. So you might have some character sets as well as meta tag, meta descriptions, and so on. There's also comment. So comments as well are not meant to be visible to the web page viewer, but they're meant to serve as a way to document and comment within your code, and it makes the code more readable, and it's good practice to be adding comments. So that just tells you when you're building out your web page what you might want to do and what you're planning to do for your website. So the exercise is to add in comments, and add comments within your website on your plans for the next part of what you want to create and what HTML code you need to add. And I've got an example here of how we write a comment. So we start with the less than sign, the exclamation mark, dash dash, and then the dash dash, and the greater than sign to conclude it. And any of the content within is not going to be presented on the page, and it's just grayed out, and it'll be commented out only for use within the source code. So going into our HTML document, so let's get rid of some of this and let's add in a comment underneath the unordered list. And brackets is going to gray it out. So this is a comment. We'll add more sections. And this is really helpful if I come back into this document maybe 6 months down the line and I've forgotten what I want it to do and what I was thinking, then I can see that I did want to add in more sections after here. As well, I might want to add in a comment up here that I want to add in more details. Maybe I want to add in some images and so on. There's also the meta tags, and these are tags that you're going to find within the head section of your page. And they typically have various attributes. So the character set will declare the page character encoding, and there's a number of different encoding styles. So UTF-8 is the one that we would typically use, and then just save that. And when we refresh the page, we're not going to see the meta information. We're not going to see the comments. It is visible when we look at the page source, and it is visible within our HTML file when we're looking at it. This is going to be an important lesson because it's about hyperlinks, and hyperlinks are at the very heart of the internet because hyperlinks provide that connection from one page to the other and allow users to navigate through the internet, jumping from page to page and sometimes from different websites to different websites. And connecting everything together is hyperlinks. Hyperlinks are done with the A tag, so the A element, and it's got mainly attributes. So it's got the location within the attribute, and then as well you can specify some content between the A or the anchor tags. So there is an exercise in this lesson, and that's to link out to your social profiles. And also using the target underscore blank will open it up to a new page. If you don't include that attribute, then it's going to simply open up the same page. It's not going to open up a new window page. So you can pause the video here and try that out. There is a difference between the absolute URLs and the relative URLs. So relative URLs would be within the site, one page linking to another. And notice that we don't have the whole HTTP / and wherever the web page is. We're simply linking within our own site. So we don't have to specify, as long as contact is on the same directory as our file that's linking to it, we're going to be able to link to it just by specifying the contact. And I'll show you a little bit more about that as well. And there's also one other one that I did want to mention. And within the hyperlink, you can also mail to. So this will automatically open up the user's mail client, sending an email and filling out the send mail to whatever the email is that you specified within the hyperlink. So try these ones out as well. Create a second page, call it contact, and then link to it from your first page, from your index page. And then as well, try out those hyperlinks to the social profiles. And I'll walk you through that coming up. And if you do need more information on attributes, that's available, again, Mozilla Developer Network. And there's a link to all of the various attributes that can be included within the tags. So the href is going to be the one that's used within the anchor tag, and that's going to be the URL of the link resource. Let's open up the index page and add in a hyperlink. So hyperlink is done with an anchor tag. And let's do the first one. We'll link it to LinkedIn. And then I'll create a second one and link that to Twitter. So this will go out to my social profiles. So whenever anyone clicks the link, it'll go out to the social profile. And them in itself, it's not going to do a whole lot unless we add in the attributes, and the attributes are going to specify the location of where we're linking out to. So I'm going to go over to Twitter, grab my social link, my social profile, and then add in the href attribute and add in the social media hyperlink. And I'll do another one for LinkedIn. So going over to LinkedIn, grab my LinkedIn profile and link to that. And let's refresh. So now they get underlines to them. And they're a purplish color because they're already links that we've clicked, that we've visited. So the browser is able to detect that. So let's try that and click the LinkedIn. And notice what happened is my entire page went there. So typically when you're building a website and you're linking out to an external source, you don't want your visitors to leave the page. So you have some options on what window you want to target, and selecting blank will open it up in a new page. So let's do a refresh and try that LinkedIn link again. So now it's going to open it up in a new tab, and we still have our existing tab within the browser open. I'll do the same thing for Twitter. And there was also a second part to this exercise, and that was typical navigation through your website. So we'll just link out to this page that we've already created, the site.html. And this is going to be located within the same directory. So when I open up the folder view and look at where my files are located, they're all within that same directory. So they're relative, and I don't have to go off into another folder or another website in order to locate them. They're directly within that. Index is there and site new temp. They could also be located within a folder, so as long as we can navigate through it and it's in my main root folder, we're good to go to add them in as a relative link. So the absolute link is where it's absolutely located on the internet, so that's including that full path. And whereas the relative link would be how it's relative to this particular page. So in this page, going over to site is going to be relative to the page. And I'll just put site there. And then within site, I'm going to add in index. So we've got some really simple navigation that we've created. And this is good enough to get the point across on how navigation is going to work. So you're going to go into one page, and that's the index page that I'm on right now. I see a link to site. So this would be a typical navigation. I would click to the site, and what's going to open is that web page. And when I want to get back to index, and that's why it's important to understand and to really plan out the linking of your website, because you want your users to be able to navigate through it smoothly. So there's a whole science behind it, navigating through your websites and making sure that your users don't get hanging on a cliff where they're falling off and not knowing where to go next. So plan out the navigation of your website, all using hyperlinks, and then also include important links that might be linking to other websites, but they might be relevant to the content and to your user's experience online. Hey, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and with HTML, we have an opportunity to add in images directly within our HTML page. And it's really easy to do. And thinking back to the hyperlinks in the last one, the magic really happens within the attributes where we're linking out to the source of the image. The image can be locally sourced or it can be from the web, and bring that into your HTML with the image tag. There's more information at the Mozilla Developer Network about the image tags, as well as some examples. And I'm going to be illustrating an example of how we're going to be grabbing the Twitter profile image and adding it into the HTML. So you can pause the video here and add in using img tag, and then src equals, and then wherever the source is located of your image, and try that within the code, and I'll walk you through that coming up. Hey, so we're going to need an image for this lesson. So you can go over to your Twitter profile or Google your name and try to find an image of yourself and go over to this image. So I'm just going to open this up in a new tab, and that's going to open up the image on its own. So you have an option here where you can save the image as, download the image. And I'll actually download the image as well onto my computer. So hit save. It's going to download as a PNG image. If you want to link to it directly from the website, so that's just hot linking it, you can click on the image, copy the image address. So that's going to give you the URL where your image is located, and from that you can bring that directly into your web page. So image src, and then specifying the path, and that is a pretty long path. So save, refresh, and there's the image. So typically with images, if you want to have them resized, or if you don't like the size of it, images do come with attributes that can resize the size of the image, but you're best off to use styling to resize it. You can also use the width attribute and you can resize the image that way. And then when I refresh it, it's going to be at 100 pixels. So that is an option, but I do suggest that when you get more familiar with styling, that you don't use the attributes within the elements, but instead you do it within the styling by selecting the element and applying styling to it. Let's do a second image, and this is going to be that local one that we downloaded to the same folder. So we're just going to link to wherever that image is located, and because it's on the same root folder, we don't have to include any additional details of the location. And as you can see, that image shows up the same as the other one that was linked directly from the Twitter website. Do you want to liven up your HTML regular text characters? Well, HTML characters will do that for you. So there's a quick way to add some interesting characters to your HTML content. I've got some examples here where I've added a phone, I've added a check mark, I've added a star. So there's a bunch of options. You can see more about it at the w3.org site. And you can pause the video here, add some of those onto your web page. So we're building out a resume, and you can set that up within the top skills and within the section titles. So try it out, and I'll pause the video and I'll walk you through some of the cool codes that are available. This is that site that had all of the different character codes to bring the character codes into your website. So go over to the w3.org, find whatever characters that you want to use. And typically the copyright is used a lot. You'll see check marks used a lot. There's check mark, and then there's just also the character code itself there. So there's a number of ways to bring these characters into your web content. So going over to the HTML, and within the skills section, I'm going to paste in the skills, so that will give me a check mark where the skills are. I'm also going to add in a heading for the social profiles and update this to be a phone. And I've got the two social profiles there. I'm going to remove out the commenting to clean that up. And then we'll do one more within the same type of structure where I'm going to add in education and update this to be a star. Refresh. HTML tables allow us a way to present tabular data and present it in a two-dimensional table, so having various rows and then columns within those rows containing content. And there's also even more structure where we can have a T head for the table head and then a T body for the table body. And I've got some source code for a very simple table located here. There's also have an option for an attribute called call span, where you can span multiple columns within one row. And that's what that's doing there, is it's spanning both columns with just the simple row within the header. So add a table to your content and pause the video here, and I'll walk you through how to add in tables with HTML coming up. There's an example of a table located Mozilla Developer Network, as well as there's some of the commonly used attributes for tables that are available. And styling, once again, you should be focusing styling, doing it with style sheets as much as possible, so with the CSS as much as possible. So within the editor, let's go down at the bottom where we've got this last section called education and create a table. So table is going to be comprised of multiple elements nested within the main table. And typically you're going to have a table head area and a table body area. And that's where you'd have all of the content body of the table. And then each one of the rows is represented with a table row. So that's the TR. And then the table cells are TDs, but because this is within the table head, we can specify that with the th, and this can be the second column. And I'll save that, and you can see that we've got the table content there down below. And then within the body, using TD, cell 1 and cell 2, and this should be wrapped with a table row as well, so that each one of these has its own separate row so that we can distinguish the content from the table rows. So let's refresh, and I'll see what that looks like. And notice that by default, the table head is slightly bold. It's more bold than the table content. And you can add in as many rows as necessary. And you can also update this, adding in the col span like we saw within the example. So if we want to span 2 columns, we can do that and refresh. And this one column is going to span 2 of the table columns. We can also add in the column back in, and we can increase the table cells to 3. And that way we've got consistency in the numbers that we have for the headings as well as for the cells. So let's refresh, and we can see that that's provided us a nice interesting table structure. So coming up, we'll apply a style attribute to the table, and we'll walk through some of the basic styling options that are available. So we've already seen what attributes can do, and you can actually add the style attribute to any element, and this gives you the ability to do styling within that element. So one of the style options that we have is to add a border, and then within the border, it's expecting specific properties. It's expecting the number of pixels, the type of border, and the color of the border. So when I do a 1-pick solid black border, I refresh, I get a border around my table, which already brings out some of the table function features. You can also apply it to the table row if you want. So any one of the elements, and that will propagate to any of the children of this parent element. And so background is another popular styling color, so you can want to set it to black. And if we want to update the font color, we can just do color. So background will be black, and then the font color will be white of the heading. So when we refresh, we see that those changes get in place. There's also a width property that we can apply. So if, for instance, we want to do style and set the width of this element, and I'm going to set it to 200 pixels. Save, refresh. Now notice that one of the things that happened here is all of that whole column got a width of 200, and that's because you can't have one of the columns moving outside of the other one. So this automatically applies that same value and stretches out all of the columns to that width. So if you wanted to specify the different style values for each one of the columns, you could do that in this type of format and have it presented within your web page. You can also do percentages as well. So there are a number of different options with styling, and typically if you're adding in style sheets, then you're selecting the element and you're keeping all of the styling within one area. But this way you're doing the inline styling, and this applies to the particular element that you're applying that styling to. So go ahead and try this out using the style attribute. Try out adding in a border, background, and color, as well as width to your various elements of the page. You've been working hard, and now you've got your HTML code and you're ready to share it to the world. I'm going to show you how and an easy way to get a web URL. Because this file that we've been working on is just sitting on my computer, and if I wanted to show it off to somebody, I can't. I can bring them over to my computer and show them, or I need to get a web server and upload it to the web server. So this is going to be a quick lesson on setting up a GitHub page, and it's a bonus lesson, it's an optional lesson. So it's not even having to do with HTML, but it's just a matter of hosting your HTML, and it's really easy. So we've been working through how to set up essentially a website, kind of a resume type site, and we've got all of the code already sitting within the editor. So let's go over to GitHub. It's located at github.com. It's a great place for developers to share their source code, to collaborate with source code. And as a developer, you're going to see GitHub coming up all the time. So if you don't already have an account, go ahead and sign up for an account. I already do have an account, so I'm just going to go ahead and sign into my GitHub account. And once you're logged in, then you go to repositories and create a brand new repository and specifying the repository name. So I'm just going to call this resume. Set it to public. You can also initialize a README file. So the README file is just an information file about what this repository is about. So it's always good to have within the repository in case you always want to check back and see what you are working on and what the purpose of this repository is. Especially when you get lots of repositories. It's going to make a lot more sense. I'm going to go ahead and dismiss. And there's an option to create a new file. So go ahead and create a new file. And the new file that we are going to be creating is just going to be an index.html. And we've got our edit, so the new view, and then we've got preview. So this is where we can copy and paste our code that we've been working on. So I'm just going to go over to here to my editor, and I'm going to grab that whole index.html code. And don't worry, you can always update the content contained within your GitHub repository at any time. And once you're happy, then just go down to the bottom and create index.html. And you can add yourself additional information as needed. So commit the new file, and you can just commit it directly to the master branch. And then you can always open it up and edit it anytime that you want. And this is where the fun part of it comes in, because this is where you can publish it to GitHub pages. So under settings, click the settings button, repository name, and then go all the way down to where it says GitHub pages. Under source, select the master branch or whatever branch that you're on. And you can see that it provides you a link. Your site is ready to be published, and it provides you a web URL. So when you click that, you can see what that looks like. And this is going to be your URL to the web content that you've just created within the course. And this is a web URL that you can share to the world. And that's it. So next time you make any changes to the code, and I'm going to go quickly and just do a quick update to this code, edit the code. And you can always copy and paste it. And I'm going to get rid of some of this content, commit the changes. And it usually does take a few minutes for your changes to take place. So depending on when it updates, and then eventually you'll find that the updates have taken place and your URL, your live content has changed. So your site is published, and you can see this is the URL that you can share. There's also the option of going into CodePen. So I'm going to copy all of this content that we had, go over to my CodePen within the HTML area, paste all of my CodePen content. And this is also another way, if I do save, if I have a CodePen account, I can save that as a web URL and I can share it. But the difference here is that this is actually sharing with the code and it's meant to be updated, whereas this is just a web URL that you can share with anyone and they can go to it and they can check out your work, your HTML work. Thanks again for taking the course. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know within the Q&A section. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to try the code out for yourself and to get more familiar with how HTML works.